Morning guys, how you all doing? Today we've got a great guitar player and composer, Carl Orr, who's going to be speaking to us today. We go into detail about his history, how he started off playing guitar, and also some of his philosophies around Buddhism and how that relates to his music. It was a fascinating interview and I could have talked to him for hours and hours. So without further ado, everybody, Carl Orr. So Carl Orr, thank you so much for agreeing to join me today. As you know, it's a new series I'm getting together. I've got this small YouTube channel, but one thing that I do know is I know lots of people in the industry and great people at that. So we met at a local school fete, as I remember.
Yeah.
And my band were playing, my little rock band, and you came up to me, one of the very few people that came up to me actually, and you said, "Hey, great playing. Here's my card. Maybe we could have a chat one day." And then I saw who you were, and I just thought, "Oh my God, Carl Orr said that I played okay," and I was thrilled. I really was. And so it was a fortuitous meeting. So thanks so much for that. So I want to sort of take you back, really, Carl. You're a native Aussie. So what first got you interested in the guitar?
Okay, actually, I was born in Britain, in Newcastle upon Tyne. I'm actually Geordie, but you can't tell.
Oh, Geordie! Way A.
Champion. I started. I was born in Newcastle and lived there until I was 12.
Right.
And then moved to Australia, and then moved back to Britain when I was 35.
Right.
So, the thing that got me interested in music was I was born in 1960, so it was the height of the British invasion, and I was in Newcastle, and there's a very strong sense that music was a really big thing in society at the time, and music was regarded as an important thing, and an important, coming from Britain, it was like an important statement of like something really high quality from Britain that was being respected around the world. It was a really amazing time to be a kid, and I guess the Beatles made their first album when I was about 2 or something, 1 or 2 years old. And the first thing I can remember of my entire life is playing a toy guitar. It's the first thing I can remember. I don't remember anything before that. And I suppose I was about 2 years old, and I was singing She Loves You, Yeah, 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 and playing this guitar. And I had obviously no idea how to play a guitar. And so there was this very quiet little sort of cacophony coming out of my guitar.
Right.
And I was, my singing was probably all right, but the guitar was just a terrible kind of atonal sort of clang, and I just thought, I've got to figure this out. And that's the first thing I can remember. Wow. is playing a toy guitar and thinking, I've got to figure this out. I can't remember anything before that. So I always was drawn to music. I had this tremendous I just, when I think about the pop music of the 60s, I loved, I wouldn't say nobody could say they loved all of it. I certainly loved a lot of it. And actually there was a lot of good music around. There was the Beatles and the Kinks and the Rolling Stones and all these the Small Faces and all these really, really great bands. And I mean, I remember people used to say I was just, well, I don't know what the word though, like ephemeral, just fashionable stuff. And I remember thinking, well, I think this is really great, actually, and I still feel the same way. And of course, it's gone on to be regarded as really timeless and actually a really golden era of music, So for me, it was very much what was on the radio, whether it was I loved so much music, like from the British pop and rock bands of the day to the singers, Dusty Springfield
Yeah,
and,
yeah, absolutely.
and Sandy Shaw was a great singer,
Yeah, 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 absolutely.
And then there was American music, Burt Bacharach, all these amazing singers like Dionne Warwick singing Burt Bacharach songs, and
Yeah.
Jimmy Webb, Glenn Campbell, all of that stuff. And then there was got a bit older, and there was the Byrds and Jimi Hendrix, and oh man, what a time to be a child. Just such an amazing era. Spencer Davis Group, and oh my God. And then the black music, the Motown music, there was Aretha, and I couldn't believe my ears when I heard Aretha Franklin.
Yeah, yeah, off the scale. Tell me something. I don't know about you, but I also think that era is the golden time of music. And when my kids were growing up, I particularly made sure that we listened to lots of Beatles in the car. I think it sort of resonates. Even now, they actually really love the Beatles.
Yeah.
And I've done something. I've given them a sort of creative instruction right from the start. That's the classic era.
Yeah. The classic era began in the 1920s.
Okay.
And from the 60s to the late 70s was the end of it, actually.
Okay. Yeah.
So, Earth, Wind and Fire was sort of the last gasp of that
era, So tell me, did you take formal lessons at a certain point with somebody? And I know you read and write music to a very high standard. Did the music theory and the guitar playing go hand in hand with you?
Always, yeah. Well, I learned, I suppose what would be regarded as a very old-fashioned way now, which was, it was actually really modern at the time, but I thought it was really the absolute right way to go about it, which is I had this guitar teacher, and she asked me to buy this book of tablature, just like beginner guitar tab.
Right.
And the first song I learned was not on top of My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean.
Right.
And it was just songs like that, like American folk songs, I suppose, like My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean. I can't remember what else was in it. But I remember walking out of my first guitar lesson able to play, the first bit of My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean after having only played the guitar really for half an hour.
Right.
And I thought, wow, that's really great, And so that was tab. And after 4 months of tab, she said, okay, we're coming up to 4 months using the tab, and that's the end of it. Now we get this book here, and it was the Sophocles Pappas a classical guitar book. And it was like we just jumped straight in at the deep end with conventional notation.
Right.
And I found it a real struggle. But then then the penny dropped. It's like, well, if that note's a bit high, then if that's E and that's a little bit high, it's probably F. And I just sort of used my brain, and I didn't really even think about what the notes were. And I must say, I didn't even think about the rhythms that much, because the logical outlay of the notes on the page, it sort of implied the rhythm. And if it wasn't quite right, I'll go, oh, I see what that means. When I hear my teacher play, I go, oh, okay, so that note is actually a little tiny bit after where I think it is. But a lot of it was just very intuitive learning for me, which I think is actually the best way. I think a combination of being quite formal and then just shoving the thing in front of the kids, and the kids are really intuitive. And if you just leave it up to them to deduce what things mean, a lot of the time they don't really need much of a helping hand.
Right, absolutely. And do you remember when your first gig would have been back in the day?
Yeah. I had a friend, and still have a friend, who lives in Melbourne, Australia, who I'm still in touch with. In fact, I was in touch with him only last week by email. His name is Mike Matthews, and he he was very single-minded about being a professional musician. And I was trying to be, I suppose, more conventional, which is something I've never been much good at. Quite unintentionally, quite an unconventional person.
Right.
And I thought, no, I'm gonna do the right thing. I'm gonna get a degree, and I'm gonna get the qualifications and be solid. And then if the music thing goes wrong, I'll be safe. But actually, I never went through with that. But he actually was very single-minded about, well, I'm going to be a professional bass player.
Wow.
And we had a really, really, really wonderful deputy headmaster at our school, Jerry Phillips, who was one of the most remarkable people I've ever met. And he just had such a burning desire to encourage every child in the school with his whole heart, whether they were
incredible,
like the kid who was screwing up and smoking behind the toilets, or like the star student, or the best basketball player, or whoever they were. He was friend to everybody.
Wow.
And he was amazing. And when Mike, my friend, started sort of messing up at school and not like missing school and taking days off, that Mr. Phillips, with his amazing compassion and understanding, said, look, I think you couldn't leave school before 16. And he said, look, you're 15 years old. You can't leave school yet, but you have my permission to just go to the music building. We had this music building with quite a lot of rooms in it. And he said, go to the music building and find an empty room, and you can just practice your bass and work on your music all day.
Wow.
A remarkable man. He knew exactly the best thing for Mike.
Yeah, yeah.
You know? So he went and looked for a job. As soon as he was 16, he looked for a job as a musician. He did various day jobs for a short while, but it didn't take him long to find a job in this is a very old-fashioned thing, which you probably wouldn't find now, but in the restaurant of this big international hotel in Adelaide, which is where I grew up, there was a band, and it used to play 6 nights a week.
Wow.
And it was this Filipino guy, Dale Adriatico, who sang kind of like Frank Sinatra, and he played a Hammond B3 organ. So there was Dale and Mike on bass, and Enrico, the drummer, and it was a full-time, it was a sort of a full-time job with a salary. I guess it was probably a modest salary, but it was enough to live on. So yeah. Mike went from leaving school to quite a short time afterwards, maybe about 3 months. He had full-time employment as a musician.
Wow.
And then he said to me, Dale wants to get a guitarist in on the weekends, on Friday and Saturday nights. I want you to come and try out for it.
Right.
And so I went there, and I had this really outrageous guitar. I don't know if you know it, at an Ovation Breadwinner. Do you remember those?
I know Ovation. What, an acoustic is this?
No, it's an electric guitar, and it's like really outrageous. And, you know, the slang, sort of an old-fashioned term now, but slang term for a guitar was an axe, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Your axe, man. And they made it to look like an axe. You sometimes see pictures of... Well, you know, Glenn Campbell was endorsed by Ovation, and he used to play one of these guitars sometimes.
I'll have to look it up. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, Ovation Breadwinner, I had one of them. It's actually a really good guitar, and so I showed up with my Ovation Breadwinner and went and tried it out. And Dale was a really cool guy, really nice guy. Actually, he's a Filipino guy, and he had that sort of, I don't know, tropical mentality, very relaxed and very nice guy, you know. And they gave me the job. So I was 15 years old.
Wow.
And I had this sort of paid gig in a restaurant 2 nights a week. And it was really great. It was great training because I had to learn a load of songs, like all kinds of songs from, you know, like Frank Sinatra songs and pop songs of the day, like, you know, Bad Bad Leroy Brown or whatever, or Feelings, or
Right.
The Look of Love, which were, you know, quite sophisticated things for a 15-year-old to play. So, and I played the flute as well.
Okay.
Time, and Dale used to feature me on the flute. So I had, you know, we didn't have a lot of money, and my mum took me to this suit hire shop.
Yeah.
And she bought me a second-hand ex-hire tuxedo.
Oh,
So,
bless.
yeah. Anyway, so I had this second-hand tuxedo jacket. It looked cool. It's a velvet jacket, you know.
Yeah.
Skinny little boy, you know, and with a black velvet bow tie, with this like really wild-looking guitar, you know.
Oh, shit.
Oh man, I must have been a sight. But man, what a great learning experience!
Absolutely. I really think that some of my greatest moments in terms of abilities have been when I've had to learn other people's music.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, the discipline of it, and really searching for and extending your own abilities to find something. And so, would you learn these all on your own, or did you still have a teacher?
No. Well, some of them I had a good ear; I could pick them up. But actually, some of them he would give me sheet music for that he'd written out.
Right.
And that was a great experience, and I remember going to his house and rehearsing with him. You know.
Right. So then from that point, were you thinking about recording your own music when you were very young, or was that something that came later on?
I didn't think I was writing. I always wrote, like, from as soon as I could play. You know, 10 chords. I started attempting to write songs. I had no idea really how to write them, but I was trying. And I remember one time I wrote this tiny little sort of suite. I mean, that sounds very sophisticated. It wasn't. But I thought what I did was I'm going to write a little tune. I mean, a little tune meaning like 4 bars of music.
Right.
Each day of the week. I don't know. It was just a little project I made for myself, and I tried to make each one really different to the other ones.
Right.
I mean, I have no idea what it sounded like, but it was just something that I found myself doing when I was only about 11 or 12. I mean, the music was really primitive, you know. Don't get any misconceptions. I mean, I certainly wasn't like a child prodigy. I was musically talented.
Right.
I had a good ear.
Yeah.
But I mean, I wasn't like, you wouldn't see me at 14 years old and think, oh my God, this kid's amazing. Like, it wasn't like that. Okay. But you would think, oh, this guy looks natural with a guitar in his hands.
Right.
And he sounds natural, sounds musical. Right. And so as far as writing music goes, I actually started. Well, I had to write music as for school assignments anyway.
Right.
So we would have to write like I don't remember what, but I mean I certainly remember having to write music for school.
Right.
And so it became something that I did. So I got very fluent with music notation, and so I suppose I was about 15 when I really had to start writing stuff for school. Right. And by the time I was 16, I was writing things that, to me, felt quite involved. I remember trying to write like a couple of tunes at that age, and thinking, yeah, okay, well, you can write 8 bars of music, but can you stretch it a bit? And I remember writing tunes that were like 32 to 40 bars long. You know what I mean? Right. I mean, you know, I remember 2 of them quite well, probably because they were the best ones that I wrote, and they were all right. I mean, they're not like what I would write now. I mean, they're sort of naive and a bit primitive, but I certainly felt like I had the ability to sort of write and push myself to keep writing until I was satisfied from a very early age.
Right. Well, I mean, I got to say that listening to your music now, I'm glad you kept it going, because what you're producing now is just off the scale, Carl. Really, It's and for anybody that's watching this, I really do suggest that you check out Carl's albums. And I've been listening sort of for the last couple of days to a lot of your stuff, and standout tracks for me, American Daydream.
Oh, thank you.
Is on the Forbearance album is just magnificent, and Katie and Fire, but it's the musical landscape that you've got is just so varied, and there's even a you've got some shred in there as well, which I was just thinking, go, come on, Carl,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, fantastic, and the depth that you have, from the most delicate of acoustic songs to something really complex in the jazz, and that whole jazz thing is. Incredible. So, will you continue to obviously keep writing and developing? Do you think your style will develop in a particular area, or are you still exploring?
Yeah, well, I have to say, one thing I was going to make a point of saying is that, you asked me about writing. How soon did I start writing? When I was 17, this friend of mine who was 10 years older than me was a guitarist, but he mainly concentrated on writing rather than playing. Right. And he said to me, if you want to be good at writing, you have to do it every day, just like if you want to be good at playing.
Right.
And I have to say, out of all the musical advice I ever got, that was the single best piece of advice I ever got.
Oh, yeah.
So I obviously sometimes in the demands of day-to-day living, you can't always find the opportunity to write. But what it means to me is it's like, well, you write at every opportunity, which sometimes might mean a whole week or a month goes by that you can't write, but the intention is it's your let's say your constant thought, to get that writing done at each opportunity. So I basically stuck to his advice, which is write like every day in inverted commas. In other words, write at every chance. So what I do is I always sit down for at least half an hour to an hour, and I don't do any more than that. It's like after an hour, it's like, okay, I've got to get on with the rest of my day. But I do set that time aside,
Wow.
And so that's why, I'm very happy that you like what I'm doing. But the reason that quality is high is because I do it every day. It's not, I don't sit and wait for inspiration to hit. I have to say a lot of the tunes that have turned out very well were very frustrating and very slow to write.
Right.
And I remember thinking, this isn't really working. It's not getting anywhere. This doesn't really sound like anything. And then just thinking, well, what if I just change this note here? That's not really working, leading into the next note. And that chord should only be half as long. When I change the chord there and just making these little changes, and suddenly it's like carving a sculptor carving a block of first it looks like just a piece of stone, and then gradually, it just takes shape. And that's the whole thing. You can take something that really doesn't look like much at all, like this amorphous blob of chords and notes, and then you just chip away at it, and it's just sometimes I do like a tiny amount. Sometimes I sit, and I always rather an acoustic guitar and a pencil and paper,
right?
And I sit there and sometimes I'll sit there and just stare at the paper and try things and get nothing,
right?
For a whole session, not even add a note. Wow. And then other days I will change one note, and then other days I'll come up with like 4 or 8 bars of music, but I just get whatever happens at the time. And I've very rarely written a whole tune in a single sitting. The tune, one tune that I did write in a single sitting is A Tree in the Desert
Right.
That one, do 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 with the bass clarinet.
Right.
That was written in one sitting, but that's the only one I've done in like 30 years like that.
And do you write the parts out for all the instruments?
Yeah, I do. So what I do is I try not to be seduced by the technology, because one thing I realized is the sounds of the recording software, the organ sound and the piano sound and the bass guitar sounds and the clarinet sounds and the string section sounds, they all sound great. So if you just play like a C minor chord with your string section sound, it sounds like, oh my God, listen to what I'm doing. It's just the C minor chord,
Yeah.
And so it's very seductive, so you can write the most boring chords in the world and the most boring bass line or the most boring riff, but it sounds like it's being played by the London Symphony Orchestra. So I always write with an acoustic guitar and a pencil and paper, and then I record what I've written.
Right.
Yeah, what I do is I mainly use the software to sort of arrange it. So I'm in the middle of writing a tune now, and I came up with this killer groove, sort of fast kind of very fast tempo, but sort of relaxed in the way that like drum and bass is very fast, but it kind of just coasts along in a funny way, but it's not like a drum and bass group. It's got that same characteristic of being very fast, but not feeling like it's rushing and falling over itself. Right. And I came up with this great groove, and I got on the software and I was writing all this stuff, and I thought, hang on, that's a great drum beat, but all of this stuff is just incoherent crap. So I switched the computer off and just left it. I haven't switched the computer on for that purpose.
Right.
Since then, and I just got the pencil and the acoustic guitar out. I was like, now I'm making sense. Really try not to be seduced by the technology.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. Yeah. And I would like to actually let you know that, people won't know, but I mean, I was teaching in London for a short period of time, different level to you. And I remember we got together one day and we were having a coffee in my old man cave in London.
Yeah.
And I was saying about, getting students and whatever else. And actually your philosophy to me that you passed on was, Andy, do a little something every day. Do a little something every day to in whatever endeavor you're doing. Make sure you keep the flow going. And it stuck with me. So every day I would, put an advert out, or I'd post or, so I think that's actually a good philosophy for life. Whatever you're doing, the continuity and keeping it going and making sure that you have a discipline behind it is extraordinary. So thank you for that, Carl. So I did listen to you back then. You might not have remembered.
I remember you're very serious and very earnest. But I think, I remember hearing this, some wise person said, don't think of 10 minutes as too small a thing. You know?
Yeah.
There is a friend of mine who lives in Australia who's a brilliant guy called Tage Johnson, and he's a Finnish man.
Right.
And as you probably know, living in Scandinavia, a lot of stuff is not translated into Finnish because it's a small population. So a lot of Finnish people are very good with languages, you know.
Yeah.
And I remember I used to bump into him on the train occasionally because we used to work near each other. I used to teach guitar around the corner from where he worked. And I bumped into him one morning and he was reading a book in Russian. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm learning how to speak Russian." And I said, "Oh, are you doing a course?" And he said, "No, I do this every morning on the train." He said, I only do it in the morning when my brain is fresh. I don't do it on the way home." He said, "But my train trip is 15 minutes and I speak and I study. I give 100% concentration for 15 minutes every day." Right. And he said it really works very well. He said, "I've actually learned how to speak Japanese, and I think German in the same way. And he said, because I've been doing this for a very long time, just 15 minutes a day. And that was such a huge lesson for me, you know.
Oh, wow. I've been trying to learn Danish, Carl.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, 15 minutes a day, I haven't even scratched the surface.
Yeah.
It's a terrifying language. It really is. Anyway, that's a story for another time.
Yeah.
Right, we've covered that. You're still teaching. You're teaching. Are you still teaching at the Middlesex University?
No. I'm not teaching at any institutions at all anymore. I taught at Middlesex University, Brunel University, Guitarist, as it was called then. It's called BIM now, BIMM, and I taught the Academy of Contemporary Music in Guildford.
Right.
And I taught at a couple of those kind of institutions in Sydney, but I'm not doing it anymore. I just sort of, I just got kind of exhausted with it, you know. So I'm the teaching I'm doing now is private teaching.
Right. Okay.
So people put Skype lessons.
Yeah.
And people coming to the house, you know.
Right. Okay.
So I'm doing a lot less teaching than I was,
right.
But people tend to come to me for two things really. One is to improve their improvisation.
Right.
And the other is to improve their notation and theory.
Right.
And sometimes both of those things,
right.
Three of those things together.
Right. Perfect.
So I'm very much a specialist in a way, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think that's great that you're giving something back, you know, because I think that you're quite an inspiring personality, and I think you actually this is what I wanted to come into. I know you're particularly sort of aligned with Eastern philosophies, and I wanted to ask how that sort of helps you on your musical journey. Really, how do you feel that it inspires you with that
Okay. Well, I mean, I think I mean for me, I grew up in a very much an atheist household, which that's fine, you know. But it wasn't for me. It wasn't for me just having no sort of philosophy underpinning my life. It just didn't work. I just felt like I was adrift, you know.
Right.
And then a friend of mine started doing Transcendental Meditation, which is what the Beatles did, you know. And I did that. I started doing that when I was 15.
Wow.
And because I was really I was kind of very prone to depression.
Right.
And I thought, well, maybe this will help, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it did help somewhat. There's no question about it. And then I became aware of John McLaughlin, the great John McLaughlin, who always had a very eastward-looking approach, and still a big part of his audience are in the East, particularly India.
Right.
I mean, he was always very much driven by Eastern philosophy, you know, and that really made me look that way. And then the other thing that really struck me was Herbie Hancock.
Right.
I remember my dad bought me a compilation of Herbie Hancock called Treasure Chest.
Right.
When I was about 15, 1975, 76.
Right.
And it had very detailed liner notes. And in the liner notes, it mentioned that Herbie was practicing Nichiren Buddhism.
Right.
Which I'd never heard of. But I saw the picture on the back of him, and Herbie looked so cool. He had a leather suit on. He was like dressed like Sly Stone or something. But unlike Sly Stone, he didn't look like he'd smoked 8 spliffs before. He looked so relaxed and alert and sort of freshly showered and clean, you know.
Yeah, together.
And I remember looking at that picture and I thought, oh, so this is how you look when you practice Buddhism? I thought that's pretty impressive, you know. And I thought, well, if I could be just a little bit in that direction, that would be great, you know. And anyway, so I was intrigued by that. I'm doing Transcendental Meditation, which is just purely a meditation technique. There's no sort of philosophy, no religious background to it, which I think is, you know, people are very put off by religion, and people just want to meditate, and it's sort of,
sure,
it's a good way in for people.
Sure.
The negative thing about Transcendental Meditation is that it is explicitly a business enterprise. You know, they make no secret of that, and they're not ashamed of it or anything. It's just like, yeah, give us your money. You know, it's not really, and it's not very supportive. I remember thinking, oh, is there someone I can talk to? I want to converse about this stuff and talk about philosophy, and go to the meditation center. It's all very, they're American guys, even though it's an Australian. So, oh, no, we don't do that kind of thing here. It's like, well, is there just someone we can talk to? Is it like a discussion group? We can talk about philosophy. Oh, no, we don't do that. And what about books? Have we got any books? And there were no books.
Oh,
none. And then I read a quotation from Maharishi Mahesh Yoga, the subject of Sexy Sadie,
right.
saying the unbelievable words, "All books are useless." And I thought, this is not for me. This is really not for me, because books have been, as well as practicing the guitar every day, I've read every day since I was 4. Wow. Ever since I was 4 years old, I've been reading a book. I've been in the process of reading a book, a proper book every day. And so for somebody to say that was like, no, you got that wrong.
Yeah.
Wonderful world of books and literature and whatever, non-fiction, everything. It's just a wonderful part of life.
Absolutely.
And I thought I need something deeper. And I went to the meditation center when I was 23, and I was really struggling, like really, really struggling with depression. And I went to the center and I said, I want something deeper, you know. And the guy said, oh, well, you can do our advanced course. It's only $125. And I thought, I'm out.
Yeah.
You know, I kept on meditating, but from then on, I was looking for something else.
Yeah.
And then these 2 friends of mine said they were practicing Buddhism. And I said, is that the kind of Buddhism that Herbie Hancock practices? I was 23. This is 1983, December. They said, yeah, it is. And I said, I'll try that. And I really liked it. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, chanted Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. And was really great. And I thought, well, that's good. But I didn't do it every day. I just sort of did it now and again. But I went to, over the course of the next 8 months, I went to a few meetings, Buddhist meetings with my friend, and I really enjoyed it. People were very accepting and very encouraging and relaxed and funny and like everything I needed. You know, I was a kind of depressed young man, and then I went to this place and there was, you know, all kinds of people that I wasn't used to. Like, I was a kind of young guy. I thought I was cool. I was a musician. And then suddenly I was mixing with like young Malaysian guys of my age who, you know, one of them was an accountant. I thought, oh, I've never spoken to a Malaysian accountant before. I thought, because I lived in this world of music, and I thought, but what a lovely guy. Isn't he great? And then there was this other guy, and he was like a sort of a prince from Indonesia, from this almost royal family in Indonesia, and he'd sort of got tired of the whole thing and come to Australia and got himself just a normal office job and just was living like a normal guy. He was quite a fascinating guy, and I remember talking with this guy, and he had like servants back in his house in Indonesia, but just such a wonderful guy, you know. And then an old Japanese woman who just was really funny, really, really funny. He was always joking around with me. And I thought, wow, what a wonderful bunch of people. I never thought I'd find myself conversing with an elderly Japanese lady and laughing my head off. You know? And it was such a great thing, because it sort of took me out of the little world of
Yeah.
Basically, and let's say, white, straight, young musicians, and then suddenly I found myself chatting with a gay guy, and I thought, well, I've never actually had a conversation with a gay person before. What a lovely guy.
Yeah.
And so it was really great, young, old, all nationalities, straight, gay, whatever. And I thought, wow, this is really healthy.
Yeah.
Because then I thought, actually, it's unusual for me to be chatting with a gay accountant, but it's probably unusual for him to be talking to a jazz guitarist.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So anyway, and then I went to Berklee College of Music in Boston, the wonderful Berklee College of Music, thanks to the tremendous encouragement and generosity of my parents. And I got so much from it. I was practicing like crazy, learning everything, soaking everything up, but profoundly depressed from being at home. Away from home.
Away from home, yeah.
Yeah. And I thought, I've got to do something to cheer myself up. And I thought, well, the most fun thing I've done in the last 12 months is going to the Buddhist meetings. And it's Japanese form of Buddhism. And I thought, well, there's a lot of Japanese people at this college. Maybe I'll just ask. So I approached one Japanese guy. He said, I don't know about it. Another guy, I said, do you know about Sokagakai? And he said, no. Then the third guy, I said, yeah, my friend does that. And I asked him to leave a note in my pigeonhole with the address of the Buddhist center. And a couple of days later, the guy did. And I went to the Buddhist center, and I went back a few times at intervals of about 2 weeks. And after about the fourth visit, this guy said to me, I know you're not chanting every day. Why don't you just give this a shot seriously for a few days, for like 10 days, and see what happens? Like just say, well, I'm going to chant every day for 10 days and see what happens.
Yeah.
I woke up the next morning. I thought, okay, I'm going to give this a serious shot. And my depression just went. It just disappeared.
Wow.
And I just thought, what the hell is this?
Wow. And
I went into college, and one of my friends said, gee, what happened to you, Carl? You got a new girlfriend? I said, no, I don't. I was too embarrassed to say what had happened.
Right.
But anyway, then I thought, wow, okay, this is probably just some sort of honeymoon period that I'm having with this, and I'll just sink back into depression again. Anyway, the next morning I woke up feeling depressed as usual. And I thought, okay, let me try this again. And I did my chanting. I chanted Nam Myoho Renge Kyo for like 10 minutes. And the depression went again. And I just kept doing it. And basically, that's what I've been doing every day since. Like I tend to have quite a depressive nature, but I've never, ever had any medication for it. Because I don't need it. And I managed to chase it away every day through my Buddhism. And I think a lot of people would never guess that I have a tendency to depression.
No, not at all. Not at all. That's an incredible story, Carl. That really is. So, well, thank you for sharing that, Carl. I just want to cover quickly. Again, there's so much I don't think we're going to be able to cover. But what equipment you're using at the moment? I see that you had a different guitar now. This Gibson, is this a 339 you've got there? That's a beauty.
Yeah, it's a 336.
336, okay.
Yeah, so it's 339 is like a small 335 made of laminated maple.
Right.
Yeah. Whereas this 339 is it looks exact. The 336, pardon me. This guitar looks exactly the same, but the construction and the wood are totally different. Oh. It's made of mahogany.
Right.
And the back and sides are a single piece of mahogany, which is carved out with a center block, half a center.
Right.
And the top is a single piece of solid maple.
Right.
With the other half of the center block in it.
Right.
So
Wow.
the construction is dramatically different to a 335 or a 339. So the
Right.
sound is very different. If this is, I think of it as kind of like a Les Paul with some air in the body.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah. Lovely.
Yeah.
And does it have a tendency to feedback or controllable feedback?
Not at all.
No.
Nothing.
That's a beauty.
It's kind of like playing a solid body, but with a slightly more interesting sound, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And what are you using for amps, Carl?
Can you see this?
Aha. The M1.
Yeah, MI. Yeah.
MI.
This is my main amp. This is made by an old friend of mine in Sydney, Michael Ibrahim.
Right.
Michael Ibrahim, MI, and he sells about, I don't know, 40 of these a year, makes them to order sort of thing. He's got a pedal company. I use his effects as well. I use his overdrive and clean boost and compressor pedals, which are really great.
Right.
MI effects. And I mean, he's an old friend of mine, and he said, "Oh, look, I'm making these distortion pedals now," and he sent me one, and I really hated it. It's like really just awful kind of metal rock pedal, which would be great for a lot of people, but for me, it was just awful. And I said, "Man, that's a good pedal, but it's not for me." And then he made his version of like a tube screamer type pedal.
Right.
And he said, "Would you mind trying?" And I said, "No, I'd be happy to try that." And I love it. I've been using it ever since. It's called Blue Boy, which is one of the tunes on the album.
Oh,
So,
right.
yeah. So the guitar wise, it's the Gibson most of the time.
Yeah.
If I'm driving to a gig, or if it's local, I use the Gibson. If I'm flying somewhere, I use a kind of Les Paul type guitar. This guitar here.
Oh, yes. I've seen these pictures from the shots from when you were making the album.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Langado. I've used it on the album. I used it on the last Billy Cobham album as well. It's a really good instrument.
Yeah.
So when I'm flying anywhere, and also sometimes for recording, I use this guitar. Right. It's a really nice instrument actually. So that's Langado Milano.
Yeah.
And the other guitar I play a bit is I use a Heritage Golden Eagle, which is like an L5.
Right.
Big 5 type guitar. And for acoustic, the old Martin.
Oh, wonderful.
So it's an Eric Clapton signature.
Oh, wow.
0028 EC, Eric Clapton.
Oh, that's a beauty.
Yeah.
Even through the Skype speakers, you can hear how deep that is. That's beautiful, Carl. That's beautiful, wonderful. So I know you're busy playing wise, so I really want to get round to is how people can find out more about you and see you live. So I know that you're at Ronnie Scott's pretty much every weekend. It's variable. I have been at Ronnie's every month for Friday and Saturdays doing the late show, but I haven't got any booked in for April and May. But I'm doing June 7th and 8th late show, playing after my old boss Billy Cobham. Oh, fabulous! Yeah, fabulous. So I'm doing that, and I mean I do lots of small gigs around London, occasionally trips to Europe and what have you. But to actually see me around London, that's probably the best place to come and see me because it's a really quality venue. Yeah. And your website, carlorr.com, does that have your dates, your live dates? No, it doesn't. The place where you can find my live dates is if there is a link, actually, if you just click on, there's a link to my Carl Orr artist page. Website, which is I always put my latest gigs on that. Right. Okay. because I'd like to put something underneath on the YouTube video to let people know where they can.
Okay. Well,
find more.
certainly Ronnie Scott's on the 7th and 8th.
Yeah. Well, I strongly recommend that people go and see you live, because you're an absolute monster on the guitar. You really are. Carl, I could speak to you for another 3 or 4 hours probably. Yeah. But I just want to thank you so much for your time and your openness to talk about all these things. And like I said, some point in the future, maybe we could cover some other aspects. If you feel that there's some other things you'd like to speak about, maybe the recording side of things, which would be fascinating for somebody like me, and maybe to cover more about the people that you've worked with. I think maybe we could cover that in another episode, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to get rid of the perception of myself as some kind of esoteric, obscure guy, because I did work with Sting last year.
Yeah.
So it's like, I can be a pop guitarist, quite happily,
Yeah, so
absolutely. I'm trying to not be Mr. Obscure, So I'd like to talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, for the moment, I just want to say a big thank you, and it's lovely to see you again. You're just the loveliest. You're the loveliest guy. Every time we met up in London, you're just so generous and sweet, and just one of the nice guys. Like I said, I'll share this. This will come live. I've just done Malcolm Foster from the Pretenders. That's going to be next Monday, and then the week after that, I'll be posting up our video. So
week of the 8th plus 15th.
So it'll be the 15th. Yeah.
Ooh, correct.
So, and I'll send you the video so you can just have a quick look before we go live and stuff. But
do you want me to send you maybe the suggestion of a guitarist or two who you might want to talk to, or have you got a big long list that you're getting?
Well, I've got a few people that I'm in contact with at the moment. But if there's anybody that you feel has got a story they'd like to tell, and people, then that would be fine. I mean, it's a growing YouTube channel, and I'm just thought it would be really interesting for people to, and I've reached out to the people that I already knew, and you're I think you've got such a great history and a lot to share, Carl. So I'm sure we're going to revisit each other. I would love to do that. So that would be wonderful, my friend.
Yeah, and we'll catch up for a coffee next time we're in town.
Yeah, for sure. I'll definitely give you a tinkle when I'm coming over next time. And if you're ever in the Denmark area, West Coast,
love
actually, yeah. You never know. You might come out and do a gig or something, and need somewhere to stay for the night. And there's room at the inn.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a good friend in Germany. And he gets gigs around Germany, Denmark, Holland, and I'm going to see him in a few weeks, actually. I'll have a word with him about maybe that.
Yeah, why not? But thank you so much, Carl.
Yeah.
We'll talk again, my friend, okay?
Yeah, hey, great, Andy. Lovely to talk to you, and look forward to catching you in person sometime.
Yeah, that would be very nice. Okay.
All right, mate. Thanks, Andy. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.